So today um, I'm going to discuss once again the peace plan of the century and Israel's reaction to it, and then the United States government's response to Israel's reaction. It is unseemly what's going on here. I want to first of all remind everyone that Shavuot, the day of the real Messiah's birth, is coming up shortly. So what I want to do here is before I get started, I want to go into Franklin Roosevelt and his religion, and how his religion caused him to act toward the Jews the way he did. We'll start right here. We'll start right here in the beginning. This is by Eric Miller, Franklin D. Roosevelt, a Christian and a Democrat. All right? So I know there are those of you out there, and who say no, Franklin Roosevelt was not a Christian. That's the one thing about you Christians that I do not understand. You think somehow that Christianity is subjective. You think you as an individual can determine who a Christian is and who a Christian is not. Of all the myriad intersections between religion and politics in the United States, perhaps none is at once so significant and so personal as occurring within the heart and the mind of the nation's executive. Though all U.S. presidents have claimed membership within a faith, indeed to this point all have claimed strains of Christian faith specifically, the particulars of their religions and political views have varied, and so assumed different forms upon being mixed. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to name one example, was influenced by the Episcopal Church, by the social gospel movement, by polio, by poverty and war, and of course by democratic politics. So we know that Roosevelt was a Episcopalian. Now, those of you who have done any study of the particular religious groups around the world, especially in the United States, you know that the Episcopalians are nothing more than Catholics. Now, I know, you Baptists, Methodists, evangelicals, Unitarians, you love Lutherans, you love to jump on the bandwagon and say that Catholics are not real Christians. Then why then do you, the aforementioned religions, why then do you follow the false doctrine of Cyril and his 15th catechetical lecture? Why? Well, that makes you Catholics too, doesn't it? All right, now that we have squared that up, I'm going to go to this particular article. It is episcopalchurch.org, right? 1988 Episcopal Church Guidelines for Christian-Jewish Relations. And when I read through part of this, I see no guidelines at all. All right. So I hope I didn't lose this already. I think in the early days of the church. Here it is right here. So it would be in the second portion, the necessity for Christians to understand Jews and Judaism. And so in the 5th verse of it, it says, from the early days of the church, many Christian interpreters saw the church replacing Israel as he says, God's people. The destruction of the Second Temple of Jerusalem was understood as a warrant for this claim. The covenant of God, as they say, with the people of Israel was seen as only a preparation for the coming of. They simply will not, are unable to use the real name of the Messiah because of their anti-Semitism. Let's be honest about it, folks. The reason why they insist on using the name of Jesus and not Yehoshua is anti-Semitism. That's the reason. They won't accept a Messiah with a real Jewish name, you see. Especially not if his real name means Jehovah is salvation. As a consequence, the covenant with Israel was considered to be abrogated. Obviously, they never read Jeremiah 31. Obviously, they never read Hebrews 8. Obviously, they never read Romans 11. The theological perspective had a fateful consequence, or had fateful consequences, as Christians understood themselves to replace the Jews as God's people. Now, what am I pointing out here? What I'm pointing out is the Episcopal Church, they themselves, their headquarters, admit that they were wrong in this matter. This is a confession of wrongdoing here. Right here. This theological perspective had fateful consequences as Christians understood themselves to replace the Jews as they say, God's people. They often denigrated the Judaism that survived as a fossilized religion of legalism. The Pharisees were thought to represent the height of that legalism. Jew and Jewish groups were portrayed as negative models. And the truth and the beauty of Christianity, what truth and beauty? They rejected the truth and went for the lies, were thought to be enhanced by setting up Judaism as false and ugly. Unfortunately, as I pointed out, the Episcopalian Church in 1988 admits wrongdoing. With the usage of the word, unfortunately, many of the early church fathers defamed the Jewish people. That was clever. They did not apply it to themselves, the Episcopalian Church, did they? No, the early days they did this. We don't do this now, they say. They imply. Well, let us go back and do not too distant history. Far into the future, beyond, as they say, the early church fathers. This was posted yesterday. No, not yesterday. That was another article that was posted yesterday that I saw. But this one was posted back in November 2019 by Matt Lebovic. Or Lebovich. His story and new evidence shows FDR's bigotry derailed many Holocaust rescue plans. Bigotry? Why, he was a decent, honorable Christian, they want to say. Not only was the U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt's perfunctory about rescuing Jews from the Nazis, but he obstructed rescue opportunities that would have cost him little or nothing, according to the Holocaust historian Raphael Madoff. FDR's role in preventing the rescue of European Jewry is detailed in a new book called The Jews Should Keep Quiet. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, and the Holocaust. Published in September through the Jewish Publication Society, Madoff's book includes new archival materials about the relationship between Roosevelt and Stephen Wise, who the author sees as a sycophantic Jewish leader used by Roosevelt to keep the Jews quiet. Yes. Wrote Madoff, Franklin Roosevelt took advantage of Wise's adoration of his policies and leadership to manipulate Wise through flattery and intermittent access to the White House. Doesn't this sound familiar? You will find it, I believe, in Daniel 10 or 11, where Antiochus IV did the same thing. He conned Jewish leaders through flattery. It could be in 11 too. All right. In return for visits to the White House, and Roosevelt calling him by his first name, Wise undermined Jewish activists who demanded the administration let more Jewish refugees into the United States. According to Madoff, Roosevelt's policy toward European Jews were motivated by sentiments similar to those that spurred him to intern the 120,000 Japanese Americans into detention camps as potential spies. Roosevelt used almost identical language in recommending that Jews and the Japanese to be forcibly spread thin around the country. That's kind of the way that that's kind of Stalin's approach as well, by the way. Madoff told the Times of Israel, I was struck by the similarity between the language that FDR used regarding the Japanese and that which he used in private concerning Jews, that they can't be trusted, that they won't ever become fully loyal Americans. They'll try to dominate wherever they go. How often have we heard that, folks? And where do you think that root of bitterness arises? In the churches, of course. During the 1920s, when Roosevelt was already a seasoned politician and a vice presidential candidate, he expressed racist views in editorials and interviews regarding new immigrants and Asians in particular. He bemoaned the creation of ethnic colonies in major cities. Our main trouble in the past has been that we have permitted the foreign elements to segregate in colonies, Roosevelt told the Brooklyn Eagle daily newspaper in a 1920 interview. They have crowded into one district and they have brought congestion and racial prejudices to our cities. During these key years before Roosevelt entered the White House, he also wrote and spoke about the mingling of white with Oriental blood and preserving other forms of racial purity. According to Madoff, all this was a part of long-held worldview that later guided Roosevelt during his 3 terms in office. Roosevelt's unflattering statements about Jews consistently reflected one of several interrelated notions. That was undesirable to have too many Jews in a single profession, institution, or geographic locale. Yes, this is the kind of language, this is the kind of mentality that was in the 1500s of Europe and before. In fact, because of this mentality, the Jews at particular times in the Middle Ages were not allowed to have any occupation whatsoever, with the exception of the one that Jehovah forbade, which is interest. interest and loan payments. Usury. That America was by nature and should remain an overwhelming white Protestant country, and that Jews on the whole possess certain innate and distasteful characteristics, wrote Madoff. All white Protestant countries. That makes me hearken back to the book The Martyr's Mirror, in which the Protestants chased down and murdered Anabaptists because they were Sabbath keepers, labeling them as Jews, which of course, for those of you who do not know why I wear this yellow star, it is because of that. It is because what the Protestants and the Catholics did to my forefathers in Europe. They're going to label my forefathers a Jew. I accept it. Because the Jews, they are my brothers and sisters. They are my father and my mother. They are my children. They are my people. They are my cousins. Even as late in the war, in 1944, when a Gallup poll found that the American public overwhelmingly approved of letting in an unlimited number of Jewish refugees, Roosevelt worked to make sure nothing of the sort took place. So the quote, "They'll try to dominate wherever they go," and we hear this among the populace in the United States all over the place. They claim that the Jews have taken over the banks. They claim that the Jews have taken over Hollywood. They claim that the Jews have taken over the U.S. political system, and everything is Zionist. Well, I've got news for you folks. If anything is Zionist, it's me. I am an arch-Zionist. My whole world revolves around Zionism. U.S. HMM exhibition distorts and minimizes Roosevelt's abandonment of Jewish refugees during the Holocaust. Roosevelt would not have had to incur substantial political risk had he permitted immigration set up to limits set by U.S. law, admitted refugees temporarily to a U.S. territory, utilizing empty Liberty ships to carry refugees, or authorized dropping bombs on Auschwitz or on the railways from the planes that were already flying over the camp and its environs, wrote Madoff. The Holocaust Museum portrait of Roosevelt is particularly problematic, believes Madoff, because of the president's torpedoing of Jewish rescue efforts, as well as documented for several decades. Specifically, Madoff pointed to David Wyman's seminal 1984 book, The Abandonment of the Jews, as well as research conducted by historians Henry Feingold and Monty Penkower. I am told that the museum's bookstore ordered only 3 copies of Madoff's new book. The Jews Should Keep Quiet, said the author who directs the David S. Wyman Institute for Holocaust Studies. It would be interesting to compare that to the number of copies they have ordered books that defended Roosevelt's response to the Holocaust. As for a response to Madoff's take on Americans and the Holocaust, U.S. HMM Communications Director Andrew Hollinger said that the exhibition clearly shows instance where Roosevelt declined to save Jews from Hitler. Rescuing Jews was not a priority for President Roosevelt or virtually anyone else in the government. Ouch. That is a major, major indictment of the U.S. government. When the Jews were hungry, when the Jews were thirsty, when the Jews were naked, when the Jews were sick, when the Jews were in prison. You know that statement in Matthew 25? Might want to read it. The installation, said Hollinger, asked a key question. If Americans knew so much about Nazi Germany's persecution of the Jews, why didn't rescue become a priority? Well, folks, I already know the answer to this. And those who call themselves Christians refuse to admit it. It is because of the innate anti-Semitism that Christianity has for the Jews. The installation poses that the question not only with regard to Roosevelt, but to various sectors of the American public, said Hollinger. FDR condemned Kristallnacht, but did not loosen immigration quotas despite pleas to do so. In other words, you can't sit here and condemn the murdering and the pillaging of the Jews and at the same time not help them. Because when you reject them, the brothers and sisters of the real Messiah, in their time of need, what is he going to do to you? I'll show you what he's going to do to you. We'll go to Matthew 25. Verse 41. Then he shall also say unto them on the left. And now, folks, we're going to go to the beginning here for just a second, just to make sure everyone knows this is talking about the Gentiles. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, and he shall sit upon his throne of glory, and before him shall be gathered the Gentiles, the non-Jew. All right? So your religion won't mean anything. And he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides the sheep from the goats, and he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. Now we go to verse 41, and he shall say unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, you cursed, into age-long fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you took me not in. Naked, and you clothed me not. And in prison, and you visited me not. Then they shall answer him, saying, Master, when have we seen you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, and in prison, and did not minister unto you? And then shall he answer unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you did it to not one of the least of these, least of who? Least of who? My brother. Now, if the Gentiles are not his brethren, then who are his brethren? By default, the Jew. Now I'm going back to this. So the exhibition clearly shows President Roosevelt led the effort to prepare America to enter war, but never made rescuing the victims of Nazism a priority. All right, read down here. He condemned Kristallnacht, but did not loosen the immigration quotas despite pleas to do so, said Hollinger. His State Department took steps to prevent Jews and other refugees from entering the country. All of this is examined in the exhibition. I would encourage people to visit exhibition in person or online and to see it for themselves. During the 1930s, Roosevelt maintained trade with Nazi Germany, and his administration even helped the Germans evade the boycott against German goods that many Americans were practicing. As detailed by Madoff, and the Jews should keep quiet. Products from Germany were permitted to enter the U.S. with misleading labels that disguised the country of origin. This helped FDR to undercut the boycott and movement supported by Jewish leaders and millions of other Americans. Even after that Kristallnacht pogrom in November of 1938, Roosevelt refused to criticize the leaders of Nazi Germany. His statement about the slaughter merely called the night's events unbelievable, and he declined to name the victims or perpetrators. Indeed, FDR did not issue a single statement critical of the Nazis during his first 5 years of Hitler's rule. In 1935, as the world went to war, Hitler broadcast his intention to annihilate European Jewry. Simultaneously, FDR refused to support a bill that would have let 20,000 Jewish German adolescents into the U.S., and Frank and her sister Margot could have qualified to be included since they were German citizens under the age of 16. So, you wonder why Anne Frank died? Well, a finger of blame must be pointed at the United States president. Roosevelt's determination to keep Jews away from America knew few limits, as probed in several chapters of Madoff's book. Although it is well known that Roosevelt took away the St. Louis ship packed with German Jewish refugees, the president took other steps that have been omitted by some of his most of his biographers. For example, when the Dominican public made a public offer to take in 100,000 Jews on visas, the administration undermined the plan. So that means the Roosevelt administration is guilty of possibly, in one fell swoop, 100,000 murders of Jews. From Roosevelt's point of view, explained Madoff, that country was too close to home, and Jews deposited there would inevitably come to America. Officials in the U.S. Virgin Islands, too, were willing to rescue Jews by letting them into the country, but Roosevelt halted the plan, wrote Madoff. When asked what Jewish leaders in the U.S. learned from those dark years, Madoff pointed to the community's later activism for the Jewish state and Jews endangered behind the Iron Curtain. What we can really see is the impact of remorse over Holocaust is the rise of Soviet Jewry protest movement and pro-Israel activism by American Jews, said Madoff. Many of the key figures in these efforts have said they were driven by determination not to repeat the failure of their parents' generation to speak out during the show. All right, so I agree with Madoff and his mentality. Even though I may only have a fraction of Jewish DNA in my body, I will speak out loud and clear against the perpetrators of the Holocaust and all the pogroms that came before. Christianity is the #1 perpetrator. Now, what did I say in the beginning of this particular video? I said it was going to be about the peace plan of the century. Did I not? Yes, I did. Let me show you something, folks. It's unbelievable. But of course, what drives this sort of treachery. What is it? Hatred of the Jews. And remember what we just read about, how Rabbi Wise was so enthralled and taken and flattered by the President of the United States, he was willing to do to his own brethren anything that the President told him to do. And what we find in this situation is essentially the same thing. U.S. demanding Israel drop claims to areas beyond sovereignty plan. Israeli officials say U.S. is pushing Israel to accept sovereignty plan as a final border and pressuring them to drop claims to the rest of Judea and Samaria. This, my friends, this, to anyone who is listening, this is the treachery of the Trump peace plan. And as I have said in many videos before, he has conned certain Jews out of flattery to do whatever it is that he wants to be done to the Jews. So Donald Trump, he leads these Jews into, okay, you can go ahead and annex 30% of Judea and Samaria and even the Jordan Valley, but you cannot go any further, and it has to be in conjunction with a peace plan with the Arabs that they call Palestinians. That can't be done. If it can't be done, and he knows it can't be done, he obviously does, then it's pure treachery. The same treachery that was pointed out in Isaiah 24. The Trump administration has called for the boundaries set by Israel's sovereignty plan to become Israel's eastern border, with Israel agreeing to give up its demand to apply sovereignty over the remaining parts of Judea and Samaria. So as I have been pointing out for the last few months, they are jerking the Israelis around with the terms of the new covenant. Well, what do you mean the terms of the new covenant? Let me show you something. We'll go to Jeremiah 31, the new covenant chapter. Why do I call it the new covenant chapter? Because within it is written the new covenant. Right here, as you can plainly see. Anybody want to argue with me? Is this the new covenant chapter or not? Who dares? Who dares argue with me concerning with this? So what we have here within the first 5 verses of the new covenant chapter, Samaria is mentioned. And back in those days, there was no such thing as Judea, because Judea was a name that was given to, I believe, what they considered parts of Samaria back then, because Jews and Edomites lived there, so they called it Judea, as in Judah and Edomia. Okay, what does verse 5 say? You shall plant vines upon the hill country of Samaria, or Shomaron, is what it is in Israel. This is one of the terms of the new covenant. So, when a Christian administration cons Jews with flattery, Jews in his administration with flattery, to put forth this treacherous, evil peace plan, baiting Israel, baiting him with, well, you can have 30% of Judea and Samaria, but no more. Since when? Since when has the Christians become the arbiters of the new covenant? You see, folks, what we're seeing in Jeremiah 31 and verse 35 is that the hill country of Samaria is non-negotiable. Israel must have all of it. Like I keep saying, this is in conjunction with the new covenant. Now I'm going to go for a second and just to cover all bases here. Samaria. Not sure. Okay. Samaria. All right. So this is Samaria. Now, as you see here, the rest of this is Judea, right? Well, Judea automatically goes to the Jews. And they only want Israel to have 30% of Judea and Samaria. This is outrageous. It is absolutely, absolutely outrageous what the Trump administration has done. Bait them into, it's satanic what's happened here. So now Benjamin Netanyahu, he can't turn back anymore. He's got to do this. Where is this at? What have I done? Right here. He's got to do it. But now they're saying that he's going to have to make this the final border. Well, folks, they laid a trap for Israel, did they not? Who did? The Christians. The Trump administration has called for the boundaries set by Israel's sovereignty plan to become Israel's eastern border. Rejecting the Balfour Declaration. Rejecting the new covenant. With Israel agreeing to give up its demand to apply sovereignty over the remaining parts of Judea and Samaria, according to a report by Gilai Tzahel Wednesday afternoon. According to the report, which cited unnamed members of the Israeli coalition government, the Trump administration has pushed for the joint U.S.-Israeli mapping team. You people in the Trump administration, you get the hell out of Israel. You have no business mapping Israel. You are not the arbiter of the new covenant. Get out. Which is delineated in the boundaries of the areas to be placed under Israeli sovereignty, to define those new boundaries as the borders of the state of Israel. With the precise boundaries, while the precise boundaries have yet to be finalized by the mapping team, Israel is expected to apply sovereignty over approximately 30% of Judea and Samaria, including the Jordan Valley, Dead Sea coast, and all Israeli towns beyond the pre-1967 Green Line. The U.S. will, in keeping with the Trump administration's peace plan, recognize Israeli sovereignty in these areas while requiring Israel not to expand towns or establish new communities outside the areas delineated for sovereignty for a period of 4 years, leaving the door open to final status negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. Have you ever thought, oh Trump administration, have you ever considered the fact that Yehoshua, Israel's Moshiach, might show up in between time? And isn't he the final arbiter of the Holy Land? Why are you making yourself equal or greater than the Almighty Jehovah himself, trying to usurp the authority that he has to give his land to his son Yehoshua? Huh? Who do you think you are? Israeli officials cited by the this particular report says the new conditions of the U.S. recognition of Israel's sovereignty in parts of Judea and Samaria would require Israel not only to fix its final border based upon the mapping team's boundaries, but drop its claim to the remainder of Judea and Samaria. Folks, this is the catch right there. This is where the trap is laid. Well, that's part of the trap. The other part of the trap is in Jerusalem. Samaria Regional Council Chief Yossi Dagan, who is lobbying against the peace plan's provisions for the establishment of a Palestinian state, said the American request was further proof that the U.S. is slowly making its demands harsher, and in doing so is harming the basic interest of the state of Israel. Now, why would they be doing this? You need to go no further than Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You see, folks, the Trump administration is possessed with the same spirit, the same evil spirit, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A spirit of treachery and deceit, and, quite frankly, murder. Dagan called upon Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to apply sovereignty immediately with or without American support. But will he? As it has been said that Benjamin Netanyahu never did want to apply sovereignty to parts of Judea and Samaria. But now, as I've been saying in several of my videos, looks like he's being pushed into it. He has no choice. But if the United States is going to push him to only do 30%, what he needs to do is quote Moses concerning Pharaoh. When Pharaoh said, all of the children of Israel, you can go into the wilderness and serve your Elohim, but the animals have to stay. The cattle, the goats, and the sheep all have to stay. And what Moses' response was, not a single hoof will be left behind. What Benjamin Netanyahu's response should be to Pharaoh, aka Donald J. Trump, is this: we will not give up a single square inch of the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And what he needs to do is move to apply sovereignty to all of the land, not just all of the land in Judea and Samaria. But he needs to send a notice to the king of Jordan, tell him you've been occupying the land of Israel for long enough to get out. Jordan belongs on the kingdom of Jordan, and the Arabs belong on the other side of the Euphrates River. This map here proves it. I'm going to show you this map. Proves it. See if I can find it. I've got too many things in my list here, but I'll find it in just a second. See here, right here. I'm going to show you this map once again. This map right here proves it. This is the British Mandate, the Jewish national home that was promised by the Christians to the Jews. The Jordanians have got to get themselves over to the other side of the Euphrates River. Period. They are squatting on Israel's land. They are squatting upon the land of the Jews. And no, the Christians are not the arbiters. They are not the testator of the new covenant. So let's go to Hebrews 19 and verse 7. All right. Okay. I don't see it here. Let's look at it again. I may have looked at it wrong. Well, hold on. It's for 17. That's not 7, but 17. So we'll look at some of these. Oh, here we go. All right, New American Bible Standard Bible says, for a covenant is valid only when that's a one with a will and testament or a will and covenant. It's valid only when men are dead and is never enforced while the one who made it lives. All right? So let's look at this thing very, very carefully. I need to go to Strong's Concordance. All right, and this person who is a testator is not Jesus Christ. He is Yehoshua HaMoshiach. And for this cause, he is the mediator of the new diatheke, which is covenant. He is the mediator of the new covenant. No, Donald Trump, you are not the mediator of the new covenant. You have put yourself in the position of an anti-Messiah. Donald Trump, you have. Now, there isn't just one anti-Messiah. There are many, as one of the apostles had written. Because when a man sets himself up as the mediator of the new covenant, and he is not the inheritor, the one who inherits it, the land, then he is sabotaging the new covenant. He is blaspheming the new covenant. He is soiling the new covenant. He is treading down the new covenant under his feet. Paul talks about this. For this cause, he is the mediator. Yehoshua, the Mashiach, is the mediator of the new covenant, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first covenant, that which are called, those who are called might receive the promise of eternal life. No, well, yes, eternal life, but he is pointing out eternal inheritance. Inheritance of what? The land of Israel. For where there is a testament, will, and covenant, there is a necessity to be the death of the, it says, a disposition by will. Okay? To place separately, dispose of by a will, appoint, and in other words, disposed of by a will. So, death of the testator or dispose of one's own affairs. See, that the way the King James translated that is in error. Death of the disposition by a will. Dispose of one's affairs. It's like a final will and testament or covenant. So I guess what it's saying is once, okay, I'll just, here's what I'll do. I'll just keep on going with verse 17. For a testament, a covenant, testament, will, and covenant, secured upon death. In other words, upon the death, that is the will and testament, the covenant is finalized. Okay? So what he's saying is, now when we go back to Jeremiah 31, we find that this right here will be final. You shall yet plant vines on the mountains of Samaria. The planter shall plant and eat them as normal things. We will also find this whole chapter will be final. At the same time, says Jehovah, I will be the Elohim of all the tribes of Israel, and they will be my people. And I will have to go to Strong's Concordance because, once again, King James puts their own spin on this. Jehovah says, all right, Jehovah says, the people, the survivors of the sword will find, that's right, not found, will find grace in the desert of Israel. All right, which means he's going to bring them all out of the Gentiles' lands and bring them all back to the wilderness of Israel. And there he will cause them to rest. Of old times, he has mentioned over and over again that he loves them with a everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness will I draw you. And again, I will build you, but the nations say no. O Virgin of Israel, you shall be adorned again with your tambourines, and you shall go for the dances that make merry. And you will again plant vines in the mountains of Samaria, and the nations say no. Donald Trump says no. He makes himself the arbiter, the testator of the new covenant, which he is not, thereby making himself anti-Messiah. Let's go back to Hebrews 9. Is it Hebrews 9? Oh, right here. For a testament is a force, is secured after a man's death. So after Yehoshua's death, the force of the new covenant became secure. It can never be changed. No nation can undo what is about to happen. They can sit there and try to make Israel sign a document. Doesn't matter. This has been in force before the United States of America even existed. This was enforced before all the nations of Europe had a name. Otherwise, it is of no strength at all while the testator lives, or while the disposal of the will is living. Or this would probably be the disposer of the will. So that would mean the inheritor, which is Yehoshua the Messiah, is the disposer of the will. He's the one that died. He disposed the will. Neither the first covenant was dedicated without blood, for when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the Torah, he took the blood of the calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book of the old covenant and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant which Jehovah has enjoined unto you." Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the Torah purged with blood, and without the shedding of the blood there is no remission. So, by the shedding of the testator's blood, the Messiah's blood, Israel, all Israel can have their land back now. That's right. That's what it means. All of their land is coming back. They will be restored. But the nations say no. So folks, I'm telling you to watch July the 1st very carefully, because there have been many, many articles suddenly going out all over the place on Hurriyet News, on many particular sites about how the Turks, the Jordanians, the Palestinians, the Europeans are going to stop the Israelis from annexing any of Judea and Samaria. But I just have to make sure you understand that you are aware that the new covenant covers Israel and all its land. It makes it so that all Israel can return to the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that any Gentile who literally participates in that new covenant will find themselves being grafted into one of the tribes of Israel. Living in that land as Israelis. The church in no way replaces Israel. To the contrary, Israel takes over with their Messiah being the king. Israel is redeemed once again. And any Gentile who wants to be like Rahab or Ruth must be grafted into one of the tribes. There is no other way. Paul says so in Romans 11. But I'm telling you right now that this atrocity that Franklin Roosevelt had committed is now essentially being committed all over again by the Trump administration in a different way. But it's the same thing. It is rejecting what is due to the Jews. Franklin Roosevelt would not allow the Jews who were hungry, thirsty, naked, sick, and in prison to escape that prison. The Trump administration, under this so-called peace plan of the century, wants to forever and ever make sure that all the other Jews that are scattered out in all the other parts of the world, in those prisons, to make sure that they never ever, ever get to go back home to the land that belonged to their forefathers, to be removed from their inheritance forever. This is what the Trump administration is pushing for. It is the same demonic spirit, and it's going to bring the United States of America to come crashing down just as hard as medieval Europe, or you can call it modern Europe today, but in my eyes, they are nothing more than medieval Europe. They are the same people. They carry the same doctrines, the same swill in their churches concerning Israel. Nothing has changed. Like I said, it is not I who mentioned July the 1st. Nope. Nah. It is the Israeli government. It is Turkey. It is European Union. It's United States government. It's Jordan. They are the ones who are mentioning July the 1st. So, I'm telling you, mark July the 1st on your calendar then. And remember, Shavuot is coming up. And I may discuss in a future video, maybe on Shavuot, what really happened on Shavuot. But in the meantime, that's the end of this particular video.